This week saw the release of Timeless #1 from Jed MacKay and a host of different comic book artists, and it promised a peek into Marvel Comics' future, and we certainly got that. We got several scenes, or just teasers, about what the future of Marvel Comics has in store for it in 2022. A lot of these things we already knew, but there's certainly some teases here to things that we are unaware of and things that could be interpreted in many different ways. And I imagine that's exactly by design, but really what Timeless #1 is, it's a character exploration for what appears to be a very important villain moving forward in the Marvel Comics universe, Kang the Conqueror. We just had the miniseries. We just had the first appearance of the character in the MCU via the Loki series. It appears that Kang is going to be very important to Marvel moving forward, and this has almost everything to do with Kang and little of anything else to do with like the future of Marvel Comics. There's certainly a tease in here, and we're going to cover that. First, I got to give kudos to Marvel Comics. It's almost like they listen to their customers. They don't really do that often. They've been charging out the wazoo for these preview comics. That's certainly what Incoming #1 last year was. It was just a bunch of little vignettes or teasers, little short stories about what they were going to do in 2021. And I'll be honest, $6 for this comic book for a one-shot about Kang, I do think is a bit hefty, considering you don't have one artist. Now, the art is good. Got Mark Bagley, Kev Walker. There's a couple more on here, and it's very well done. But I do think $6 was steep for this. But you get a very well executed story, which I cannot say for the previous times they've actually charged their customers for these preview comics. So if you like Kang, I think you're going to love this comic book. And if you don't mind shelling out $6 for a really well executed one shot about a character with some hints and teases at the future of Marvel Comics, you'll probably like this as well. Now let's get right into these teases. Obviously, these are going to be the big news items coming out of this comic book and what everyone was kind of expecting. And it comes basically in the form of this. There's a chronal anomaly. We have Kang, and they call him Petrov. We might as well call him Plot Device, and I do not mean that in a disparaging way. This character, Petrov, he's a human. He's traveling around time with Kang. In order to give you a perspective on the character, Jed MacKay uses this character very effectively to frame who Kang is, what his motivations are, and what his past is. And they are checking on this chronal anomaly where apparently the future of the 616 is in jeopardy because there is a pirate timeline out there that is trying to reattach itself after Kang had destroyed it many years earlier. We'll hit the big ones first, the ones that should have everyone talking about, but I'll give my explanation on what I'm seeing here, some of the possibilities, and then we'll kind of get into the story and talk about what it's all about. These are the images that should have a lot of people talking. Up here on the top right, obviously it appears that the Winter Soldier has assassinated, murdered Steve Rogers, Captain America. You cannot see the face of either character. That's likely by design. So it could be a red herring or some type of swerve, but that's clearly what they're talking about there. And there's other text that says a new god takes their throne. That's clearly the Iron God that Christopher Can't Write Well has created in the Iron Man series. And then here on the bottom, this one is interesting. It says the brave honor the sacrifices of those in their hearts. There's a few interpretations that you could go with this one. That the Black Panther here is Shuri, and Spider-Man in this case is either Mary Jane or even perhaps Mayday. Another interpretation is that these are the children of Peter Parker and Mary Jane fighting the children of T'Challa and perhaps Storm. Another interpretation could be that maybe these are female versions of the heroes from the Gwenverse. I think that one's the least likely. There's certainly going to be some more gender swaps of mainstream heroes within the Marvel Comics universe. This should be expected. It's what they've been doing for a very long time. These are very easy. It says the son takes up the Twilight Sword and strikes down the father. That's clearly Doyle Dormammu, who's in Strange Academy right now. He's been having visions of essentially being a villain in the future. He has clearly taken the Twilight Sword and killed his father, Dormammu. And now we have another one that says, while a son with no father finds a new home. And it appears that Ben Reilly is exiting New York City and going to Hollywood. Is he going to be an actor? Has the Beyond Corporation decided to invest in movies? I'm not really sure, but that's clearly where Ben Reilly is going. So if you're a Ben Reilly fan, he is not going away. It is apparently still going to be Spider-Man rather than Scarlet Spider. And the final one says, the Iron Fist reforged for a new hand. We're getting a new Iron Fist in 2022. We already knew that. Let's move on to some of these other teasers. A young generation of Avengers rise. So the young Avengers are back. We've got Destiny, Kate Bishop. Heck, that even kind of looks like Dr. Aphra. I'm not really into these characters. And then we have, to reclaim a stolen name, perhaps the Thunderbolts have disguised themselves as the Young Avengers. We know that the Thunderbolts have done things like that in the past. appears to me that there will be a Young Avengers versus Thunderbolt story in our future. Next, we do see the Punisher with his new logo. No guns, but he has swords as he fights alongside some ninjas. And this image has certainly been misinterpreted. I had someone say it looks like in Judgment Day that it's going to kick off with the Eternals destroying the moon where the Summers live. It clearly says the moon cracked in a great reckoning. That is certainly teasing of Reckoning War in Fantastic Four from Dan Slott. And then it says, while further in the future, another reckoning leaves humanity with Dominion over Earth. We see the Orcus flag. Dominion is a clear reference to some of the information introduced in House of X Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman. I imagine we're going to get some future timeline story. Maybe that's the 10 lives and deaths of Wolverine. There are a couple more teasers. They certainly tease a character, Jack of Hearts, in here. Seemed like the least interesting reveal in this whole page. But if you're a Jack of Hearts fan, it appears he's coming back. And then we have this next page. These are the final sets of reveals. We have New York City. At first, I thought it was webbed up as if maybe Spider-Man had gone nuts, which we are seeing in the Darkhold. But it also looks like it might be fractured glass, like it's another pane of reality that's breaking, something like that. In the second picture, we have Ravencroft. That's either an explosion or perhaps an incoming ship. Ships don't normally sail in the sky, but that does look like an outline of one. And then this final picture is of Thanos with Mjolnir, with the Infinity Stones. We've seen this hinted at in Thor from Donny Cates. And if you recall from that Thor series, Thanos with this hammer is what eventually kills Thor in the end. And I definitely want to hear from you guys. What are your theories about all the spoilers of the teasers of the future of Marvel Comics in 2022 presented in those 2 pages? There are a couple of other hints or spoilers kind of offered up in the comic book. I'm not going to ruin everything. What do you guys think about those? What do you think they'd be? Now let's get into what the comic book is really about. And like I said, it's about Kang. And it's this character Petrov, who's the audience insert for us. And he's traveling around space and time with Kang for a week, who is impressed with his understanding of villainy as he's written this story on Doctor Doom. Kang does seem to think it's an affront to his reputation and his powers as a villain that he would consider Doctor Doom the greatest villain of all time. And he's monitoring him, and he's going back in time. He's killing a woolly mammoth or whatever. But really, it's the exposition that's provided about the character, what Petrov is observing about Kang throughout time, where they're really laying the groundwork for who Kang is right now and why he is such an enormous threat to the 616 when he decides to lay his eyes on it. As I mentioned, we see this chronal anomaly. Very quickly, Kang figures out that it has to be a Doom. So he and Petrov are going to actually go over to this pirate timeline that's sitting out there that's trying to reattach itself to our timeline. You can see he's very excited. He likes to fight Doom. He likes to show everybody that he is a better, more powerful villain than Doom. One of the other things that's interesting about this is that Kang is a human, but he feels like he's above humans, but he doesn't want to be a god, because if a god kills another god, it's not all that important. But if a human does it, he's done something magnificent. So he certainly thinks very highly of himself. And despite being a human, he does feel like humans are absolutely disposable tools, if you will. And that's one of the underlying themes about this, is that he is human. He understands humanity, but he has absolutely no care or want for humanity. So it's a very interesting take. When it gets to the pirate timeline, there is an interesting question presented. What if it's another Kang that's waiting for you? And Kang's like, it can't be me. A Kang would never do this. It has to be a Doom. A Doom is the only entity, like in the multiverse, that would ever try and do this. And wouldn't you know it, they do find a Doom. You can see by his glowing eyes, there might be some Infinity Stones involved. And this Doom has ascended to some type of godlike existence because of some other modifications that he's made to his body. Like I said, I don't want to completely spoil everything. There absolutely is a confrontation between the two. There's a clear winner. I imagine most of you guys can figure that one out. It's a really good comic story. It's a really good, effective one-shot. I think Jed MacKay kept this really tight. They did a good job of keeping artists in there that accentuated each other. We had Marte Gracia as the color artist, certainly, so there was some type of cohesiveness between the art, and it really stands out as being a really fun, well-constructed, well-thought-out narrative about Kang throughout this. I think it's really good. I just don't think the price is completely right. We also got a few other things at the very end where they're talking about some of the other comic books to watch out for. Obviously, we know about Devil's Reign. Death of Doctor Strange is about to wrap up. Amazing Spider-Man Beyond, that'll be wrapping up in March. 10 Lives and Deaths of Wolverine, ushering in the second age of Krakoa. Fantastic Four Reckoning War, we haven't really gotten into that, but according to Dan Slott, he's been teasing at it for 15 years. Avengers Forever, we know about that one. And then Hulk, Thor, Banner of War. Of all of these events that are mostly going to be happening in the first part of 2022, I think the Hulk, Thor, Banner of War event crossover that Donny Cates is doing will be the main event, whether Marvel Comics want it to be or not. This will certainly overshadow Judgment Day or anything else that they can put out there. We got a lot of teasers about the future of Marvel Comics. We got a really good cohesive story about Kang the Conqueror. So I do think this was easily their most successful preview comic that they put out. They certainly listened to the audience, and they made it more worth your money than they have in the past. So if you're looking forward to this, or maybe you were hesitant, if $6 isn't too much for you, I think you'll probably like this comic. It was actually quite enjoyable. If you're looking for more information, in my opinion, on Judgment Day, the X-Men Avengers Eternals crossover, I actually made a video a couple of days ago. Maybe it was yesterday. Definitely check it out if you're looking for some information on that, because you're definitely not going to get it in this comic book. But there's certainly some teasers out there for this as well.